When I look at Penn State going into next season, there is a lot to like about this team. However, there is one glaring weakness, and no, it's not wide receiver.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football, and thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day, the number one Penn State sports podcast out there. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section as we're going to assess the team overall. Talk about the position groups that certainly have the most attention, that certainly have the most question marks here. And in the process, what to like about this team in 2025. Why a lot of the strengths maybe upset the one glaring weakness that Penn State has. And that's where I'm going to begin. Most people are going to say it's wide receiver. Some people are going to try to make jokes and say that it's Drew Allar, it's the quarterbacks. Allar shouldn't have come back. Okay, we'll leave that aside. The actual glaring weakness, the thing that could cost Penn State games, is defensive tackle. And that's how I define weakness here, is that a weakness does force you to lose games. When I'm looking at this wide receiver position, I don't see them losing games for Penn State. Oh, well, they lost against Notre Dame. It's in the national semifinal. I'm talking about when a game is on the line. Wide receiver costs them in the moment. And frankly, there were a lot of other things that went wrong in that Orange Bowl game that were separate from just the wide receivers. So for Penn State, it's defensive tackle going into 2025. Defensive tackle has Zane Durant, Alonzo Ford, who's coming back from a long-term injury, and then a lot of uncertainty and question marks. This group can lose games for Penn State if they get unlucky. Zane Durant, you need him to be healthy for the entirety of the season. I believe that this is a first-team all-conference player. Maybe he teeters into All-America status. I look at Alonzo Ford, and he's an all-conference player. Everything after that is up to interpretation. Now, James Franklin did give us an update recently from spring practice, talking to us after another practice goes by in the books, and said that Xavier Gilliam has separated himself enough where Franklin can confidently say that the top three defensive tackles are, yes, Zane Durant, Alonzo Ford when he comes back from injury, Xavier Gilliam is in that rotation. That's a step in the right direction. That at least gives you some optimism. Everything after that is an uncertainty. It's a lot of depth, but no experience, no proven ability. Ty Blanding, Caleb Artis, they got Owen Wafel in the transfer portal. Liam Andrews, Randy Adarica. I'm very high on Randy Adarica and his potential and upside and what he can do long-term for the program. But we're talking about now when there's a championship window, a legitimate national title window, which is why I'm not afraid to go on the record to say that this is a championship or bust situation. You have a fourth-year veteran quarterback with his coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki, for the second season in a row. You were able to get both Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen back. Easily the best offensive line in James Franklin's tenure, and it's not even close. The depth that this group has can survive the attrition of a 17-game season. Oh, but they lost Tyler Warren, Luke Reynolds, Khalil Dinkins. Andrew Rapplier is going to come back from injury. Tight end depth is good. No, they don't necessarily have a superstar, but I'll give Luke Reynolds some time. A wide receiver is in a no different spot than last year, and they made the national semifinal. Defense just picked up Jim Knowles. Secondary is loaded. Defensive end is loaded. Linebacker, I want to give another take on the upcoming segment about linebacker. Linebacker's in a solid spot. This group is not a liability. There are strengths, there are net neutrals, and there are weaknesses. Penn State has a lot of strengths. Net neutrals are, I think, the wide receivers, the linebackers. Groups that I wouldn't necessarily say that this team propels them to victory, but they're groups that are competent, are capable. There's a lot, again, depth. They have depth. They have options. But to take over games and say, yeah, that's going to get Penn State across the finish line, okay, maybe not necessarily. But then you have the strengths. Running back, offensive line, defensive end, secondary, cornerback and safety alike. I'm enamored with the secondary and just how much talent is in the back end of the defense. So defensive tackle is a point of emphasis here because they can lose you games. Alonzo Ford doesn't come all the way back from injury. Zane Durant, again, you got to be lucky and hope that he can survive. They say 17 games. Penn State fully intends to play in a national championship. That's the aspiration, right? That's the hope. That's the goal. So they're going to say 17 games to speak it into existence. You're hoping that Zane Durant is going to be able to go, and he has these past couple of seasons, but that's just because, right? You need the depth behind them. So I don't want to try to speak that into existence. I don't want to speak the negativity, but you need insurance. You need reassurance here. And there's a lot of players I think have long-term upside potential, but what can they contribute this season? Penn State is absolutely in the right if they try to go back into the transfer portal and get a capable veteran. That's what this group is really devoid of, is veteran experience. Because all of these players have talent. They're former 4 stars. I think Liam Andrews and Randy Adarica can become star players in due time if they continue on the right trajectory and stay healthy. But that's not a guarantee. And especially when you look at this season, when this is a national title contending team, you're going to get run all over if you don't have Zane Durant and Alonzo Ford and Xavier Gilliam all ready to go for as many games as possible. In crunch time against the likes of Oregon, against Ohio State, and frankly, for what it's worth, teams like Indiana. Penn State at defensive tackle, if this group is not shored up, then you're just, like I said, you're going to get run all over, especially in a 4-2-5 defense. And a 4-2-5 defense, if you're not stout up front in the interior, that's a problem in the Big Ten. That's a weakness of the 4-2-5. That's a gamble you take. It's not necessarily a weakness because Penn State's run defense was pretty good last year when you had Zane Durant, Devon J. Thomas, Keziah Izzard. That was a real, and Alonzo Ford before he went down due to injury. That core 4 right there, that's what Penn State's looking for. And you notice Alonzo Ford goes down, and fortunately you were still able to get maximum capability from those other 3. Zane Durant's going to get better. I'm optimistic that Alonzo Ford, James Franklin said that he'll be back in due time, that he'll be ready to go, that he's going to be a solid, capable starter. We know that. I think he can be an all-conference player if he puts together a full body of work. For me, the jury is still out on the likes of Xavier Gilliam. James Franklin, I'm glad that he can confidently say in the middle of spring practice, halfway through, that, yeah, this guy has separated himself from the rest of the competition. That is fantastic news when this is the position group that I have circled. Everything else, though, is concerning, because if players aren't ready and they're forced to step into a role that they're uncomfortable with, then that's gonna be a recipe for disaster when this is a national title contending team. Go into the transfer portal. Try to make a serious move. If it's somebody that is a co-starter alongside Alonzo Ford and Zane Durant, somebody that is at least a veteran but gives you a guarantee at the 2 deep spot, heck, I wouldn't be opposed to 2 defensive tackles if they are available. Penn State was targeting them in the winter portal window for a reason. They're going to do it again if the opportunity presents itself in the spring transfer portal window, and I think they'll be a little more aggressive. They can absolutely go after wide receivers too. There's always room for improvement. That group's not perfect, but I'm here to say that they don't necessarily lose you games. Again, not a glaring weakness, but also not a strength. So let's talk about that a little more. What does wide receiver give Penn State? Why I don't look at them as a weakness? And the same thing with linebacker. People are concerned about linebacker. Linebacker's in a much better spot than people give them credit for. We'll talk about that coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. That is right. $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel is great because it makes betting easy. Whether you're picking your favorite team or you want to jump into some player props, and that includes everything. 3-pointers, assists, steals, points scored, you name it. FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player and their props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head over to FanDuel.com and claim $250 in bonus bets today. Again, that is $250 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet over at FanDuel.com. Wide receiver, linebacker are the other two position groups that everybody is going to question or be concerned about. And yes, wide receiver could be better. I honestly don't have many concerns with the linebacker group, actually. Let's start with wide receiver, though, because it's a sore topic for a lot of Penn State fans, and for good reason, because the last few seasons have been rough. They've been downright abysmal. And yeah, in the biggest moment of the game was biggest moment of the season, in the biggest game of the season, they were a liability. In this case, they're actually better, in my opinion. And they have nowhere else to go but up. But this is a group that has veteran players that are going to give you specialty skills. Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross out of the transfer portal, and I'm not opposed to Penn State going and getting another player. If there's a wide receiver he could be a star in Penn State's offense, the more the merrier. Because similar to defensive tackle, there's a lot of unproven depth with, hey, guess what? That potential. Everybody likes to talk about potential. Well, that's certainly what this group has. When I compare and contrast wide receiver and defensive tackle, though, there seems to be a little more certainty with the wide receiver group, if you can believe that. Kobe Howard looks great in practice. I've been impressed with Peter Gonzalez, Josiah Brown. Tyser Denmark generated a lot of buzz. Maybe not the extent of this time of that proverbial buzz, where it's constant. It's Tyser Denmark. I think that intrigue has gone away, but not his ability. Just because not everybody's talking about it as much doesn't mean that he still isn't intriguing going into this season now that he has a year of experience under his belt, now that he can get used to the playbook, now that he has, because he enrolled late. He wasn't an early enrollee. This is his first winter workout spring season. That is immensely valuable to someone like Tyser Denmark, who is going to need to step up. Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross give you veteran certainty. Kyron Hudson is going to be useful in the run game. He is a bigger body wide receiver. He can block. He can also be a reliable option on third down. He doesn't drop a lot of passes. I know I went on the record and said, hey, he had a bad practice. It didn't look great, but that was a bad practice. Recently, he was named Iron Lion of the Week by James Franklin. So clearly that 10 minutes, let's overreact to 10 minutes. That's my job here anyway. So Kyron Hudson is going to be a mainstay for the wide receiver group. Devontae Ross has certainly stood out as well. He's able to create separation. You can't teach speed. And what Ross's speed does is it forces defenses to double cover, leave a safety back. And when you leave a safety back, that takes an extra defender out of the box, because this team, it's not about passing the football. Having Drew Allar, a former 5-star quarterback, despite what the naysayers might say, Allar is an asset to the team, and it's great to have a quarterback with his capabilities. But this is a team that is going to rely on the offensive line and the ground game first, and other players are going to get involved in the passing game. So it's not all on the wide receivers, which aren't this phenomenal group. They're okay. They're fine. But they're not going to be the priority. They're going to be complementary. To talk about Ross again specifically, his speed takes an extra defender, forces a safety back, or Andy Kotelnicki is going to dare you to leave Devontae Ross in one-on-one coverage with a slower cornerback, and then Ross, with Allar's cannon of an arm, will beat you for an 80-yard touchdown pass after a touchback. Or I guess they moved it up to the 25, right? So 75 yards. You get my point. Speaking about Hudson, his reliability with his hands, get him, go to him on third down and medium. You can rely on his blocking ability, his veteran ability, and how he conducts himself. Devontae Ross, that's speed. motion, the jet sweeps that Andy Kotelnicki loves to use in his offense. Drew Allar can hit both of them. But they complement what Penn State wants to do, being a run-first team, relying on the offensive line, the depth that the offensive line has, Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen, and they're going to run 3 running back sets more often than not. Believe that. Quentin Martin, Corey Smith, Tyke Hayes, all battling it out for that 3rd running back spot. So this offense goes beyond, well, what can the wide receivers do? What can the offensive line do? What can the running backs do in the passing game? And the tight ends. Luke Reynolds is a former 5-star for a reason. Is he going to be Tyler Warren 2.0? In due time, I know that's hefty optimism. Reynolds certainly has the capability of turning into a 2nd or a 1st round type of talent when it comes to tight end. Khalil Dinkins, solid veteran. So Penn State's going to run a lot of 2 wide receiver, 2 tight end formations, 2 or 3 running back formations, and get creative with the most creative offensive coordinator in college football. Let's pivot to linebacker. Linebacker, people are concerned with this group. Some people. I'm not. I think Tony Rojas is ready to take a next step into potentially being a superstar. You get Keon Wiley back from injury. Wiley was a breakout player going into last season. They lost him for the entirety of 20. He practiced, right? He practiced. But they lost him for a bulk of the 2024 season. Dom DeLuca, veteran presence that can be a 3-down linebacker. Is he a superstar? No, but he could be an all-conference player at the end of next season. And you run a 4-2-5, so kind of like the wide receivers, there really isn't a lot of pressure on this group, but I like that trio. I like that starting trio of you rotate through Tony Rojas, Keon Wiley, and Dom DeLuca. You have the depth to back it up. Tamir Robinson has generated buzz. There's a lot of optimism now that he's healthy. They moved Dakari Nelson from safety to linebacker. He's getting situated. Anthony Specka goes through his first full season of winter workouts, spring football. Kari Jackson's back from injury. Yeah, sure, they lost Kobe King. It would have been awesome to have him back. But those 3 starters right now, Tony Rojas and Keon Wiley, I think Rojas can give you star ability. I think Keon Wiley in due time is not somebody that should be overlooked. This is more than just your average linebacker. We know what Dom DeLuca gives. Dom DeLuca is great in run defense and pass defense. Interceptions, pick sixes for a guy that doesn't look like that all-encompassing linebacker, but is. And then the potential of Tamir Robinson, Specka, Nelson, Kari Jackson, LeVar Arrington II. Linebackers in a solid spot. Linebackers I would still consider that a neutral group. I don't know that that's a strength for Penn State just yet. I do want to see if Tony Rojas can take that step forward. Keon Wiley, they need to prove it to me, even though I am optimistic, but they're definitely far from a weakness. This is a group that has plenty of depth ready to go. Now, still to come on this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, Penn State has a few position battles besides the ones that I've named here. Offensive guard, who's going to replace Sal Wormley? QB2, who is the direct backup to Drew Allar? Don't just assume it's Ethan Grunkemeyer. I'll tell you why on the other side of this break. Ethan Grunkemeyer versus Jackson Smolik. There is a QB2 battle going on. Most people assume that it's going to be Ethan Grunkemeyer, as they should. He's a former top 10 quarterback out of high school, invited to the Elite 11 camp. So was Jackson Smolik, for what it's worth. And I think Smolik gets forgotten about in this process because he didn't come in with the same pedigree. If you look at the recruiting rankings, he was a 3-star compared to Grunkemeyer, who was in the top 10, was a high-end 4-star. But Smolik getting invited to the Elite 11 just because the recruiting rankings say, oh, well, he's a top 30, really top 40 according to some sites. But I'm going to trust the Elite 11 that their job is to scout and find the top 20 quarterbacks. So it's safe to say that Smolik at the time was a former top 20 quarterback coming out of high school. But Grunkemeyer does have the more impressive resume coming in. Grunkemeyer, a little more of a dual threat athlete as well, which is what I think gives him the advantage here. But Smolik continues to be somebody that steps up, that impresses. He's forgotten about because he was injured all of last season. He missed all of last season. Granted, he started practicing kind of similar to Keon Wiley, but now he's back. Won a few Winter Workout Warrior nominations and was the leading quarterback. He picked up the most nominations out of the quarterback room. So Smolik's here to stay. Smolik's here to fight. James Franklin commended him on his deep ball accuracy in comparison to, at the time, Drew Allar and Bo Pribula, saying that Smolik sometimes had the better deep ball accuracy. That was a couple years back when Smolik was a true freshman. But you get my point, is that don't just say that, oh, he's QB3, he has no chance, this shouldn't be a battle. No, it should be a battle. When he has more experience, when he arguably might have the better arm, I do think Grunkemeyer gives you better dual threat ability. He's faster than Smolik. Smolik is coming off of a leg injury as well. I do wonder about this, if all three quarterbacks are going to be utilized to an extent. What wouldn't shock me is if it's QB 2A and 2B, and that Grunkemeyer actually happens to step into that Bo Pribula type of role, and Jackson Smolik is the designated backup quarterback, but in a sense, they both back up Drew Allar. I don't think you can go wrong with either. I would give the advantage to Grunkemeyer because I think his skill set's a little more all-encompassing than Smolik. I'm here to say that you can't count Smolik out, and I would not be surprised if he wins. My prediction would be Grunk. Does not surprise me if at the end of the day, when we get to fall camp, if the depth chart says Allar, Smolik, and Grunkemeyer, but you get those Lion packages, and instead of the Bo Pribula package, it's the Ethan Grunkemeyer package. I think Grunk's athleticism is being severely underrated here, and he can be used in a similar style. Now, Bo Pribula is almost peak when it comes to that dual threat running quarterback where he's tough. Maybe I shouldn't be discounting Grunk like that, but because we haven't necessarily seen it from him. We've seen Pribula do it, which is why we can believe that. But Grunk does have more speed, quickness, and agility to him than people are going to give him credit for. So QB2 is certainly a position to watch for. I would not be surprised either way, but quarterback depth's in a solid spot. You lose Bo Pribula, but you have two capable backups behind Drew Allar that either of them could quarterback this offense in a moment's notice. It's not going to be a situation where Iowa circa 2021 where Taquan Roberson comes in for Sean Clifford completely unprepared, or the way it looks. No, at a moment's notice, if Grunk would have to go in, and if Smolik would have to go in, you have two capable backups behind Drew Allar. That is a good thing to have if they both happen to stay, and they should. But if both quarterbacks are vying for the backup QB spot, I don't think there's going to be any transfer portal attrition there. And then on to that guard spot. Penn State's offensive line, between running back, offensive line, and defensive end, honestly, secondary, a lot of groups are vying for Penn State's top position group. Because when you have 4 out of your 5 starters coming back, Drew Shelton at left tackle, now Venga Ioane could play either left or right guard, so it's just a starting open guard spot. They can move him, they could keep him at left guard, they can move him over to right guard. It's going to be a starting guard spot. Nick Dawkins came back, he's going to start at center. And then Anthony Donko, Nolan Rucci, who's going to be your right tackle? Remember, Donko's dealing with a long-term injury. He'll be back sooner rather than later, and Nolan Rucci hasn't been available this spring either. But Phil Trautwein was available after practice the other day, and he talked about that everybody's in the competition for that starting guard spot. And it shows how deep this group is. Because you have the flexibility to say, yeah, Anthony Donko's in the guard competition. So is Nolan Rucci. So depending on who's right tackle at the end of the season or going into the bulk of the season, that player should be in line to compete and should be in the competition, because you're not guaranteed, just because you're not starting at right tackle doesn't mean you're automatically the right or left guard by proxy. No, you're going to have to compete for that. I would see, this is my anticipated offensive line at the end of the season in crunch time, if everybody's healthy, of course. Drew Shelton at left tackle, Venga Ioane at left guard, Nick Dawkins at center, and then Nolan Rucci or Anthony Donko, whoever's better suited at right guard and right tackle, respectively. I think you're going to have right guard, right tackle. It's either going to be Rucci, Donko, Donko, Rucci. That is what I anticipate. But that doesn't guarantee anything just because that's my expectation. Remember, this group has JB Nelson, TJ Shanahan, a former 5-star prospect who started 8 games for Texas A&M last season. Javen Williams is a former 5-star. Chimney Ono's a former 4-star. I'm going off of Phil Trautwein. Trautwein named all of these players. Alex Burkmeyer, former 4-star guard. Oh, and Cooper Cousins, one of the best prospects in Penn State's class of 2024, could certainly slide in and be an immediate starter. That is the flexibility. That is you want to talk about insurance? Because your offensive line can get banged up, beat down, and lose a bunch of core players. And I just rattled off 4 or 5 players that could absolutely start and you couldn't go wrong with. You couldn't go wrong with Javen Williams. You couldn't go wrong with TJ Shanahan, JB Nelson, Cooper Cousins. All of those guys make sense. Penn State has the capability to even start one of its right tackles because there's another exceptional right tackle. Offensive line is what's going to be the difference for this team being a national title. This is the difference between being a national title contending team and not. When you have an offensive line that is as deep as this group, and this is just, I'm only referring to the players that are in the guard conversation. Garrett Sexton has stepped up in spring. Egan Boyer goes through another offseason. Malachi Goodman comes in as a true freshman early enrollee. So Penn State certainly has the assets, and they're 3, almost practically 4 deep at each position on the offensive line. That is the insurance that you have as a national title contending team. And that's why I say Penn State's offensive line conservatively is top 3, because I don't know every other college team's offensive line situation by heart. But they're definitely top 3, given the starters and then given the depth behind them. And it's because of the depth that they can make a case to be the number 1 O-line in the country. Because when all's said and done, you're getting similar production, similar capabilities. Hey, and that's how you get depth to make it through the season. When you don't have a player, coach, I need a drive off or something, and players aren't going to do that. I'm not trying to say that this group's weak but if you get banged up on a drive, you need a drive off, you get the similar production. Cooper Cousins, maybe he's the starter, comes out for a play or two. TJ Shanahan goes in, and there's not much missing. There's not much that separates them. That's a luxury for Penn State to have this season, and it just helps everybody out. It helps the run game. It helps Drew Allar sit back, read a book, and let the wide receivers get open with as much time as they need, right? It's a domino effect that everybody benefits from the offensive line being possibly the best position group on this team. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Thank you so much for checking out this episode. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section, your biggest question marks, your biggest concerns, which groups you're most optimistic for. If you are new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. And for more conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, keep it right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, you got to check out Locked On NFL Draft with hosts Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez as your favorite collegiate players, your favorite former Penn State Nittany Lions. Get ready for the next level. Get the latest draft rankings, rumors, news every single day with Locked On NFL Draft. You can find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And it is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day.